before you stitch up your sides, take your work, spread it out lengthwise, the longest part end to end in front of you. After deciding which is going to be your top and which is going to be your bottom. For mine, I decided to have the widest portion going at the top with the peak at the top, or you can have yours flip the other way if you like that look better. It's entirely up to you. So you need to find your center. Easy way to find that, fold your work in half. Make sure everything lines up so that, you know, one end isn't stretched longer, stretched out more than the other. Make sure it's lined up. So where your fold is in the center, which should be one of the cluster shells, that is your center point. So, and also get your stitch markers. You will need 3 of those. So take one stitch marker and place it through a few stitches in the center, just so it's easy to see for you. Make it easier. Okay, so that's your center point, and to double check that you have put it in the right place, count again all your clusters across. And for example, I have 19, so this will be the center, should be my 19th one, okay, and then I will have 9 clusters to the right and 9 clusters to the left. 9 and 9 make 18, plus 1 is 19. So once you've determined that, you have your center cluster, then count 3 clusters to the right, 1, 2, 3, and place another stitch marker in this 3rd cluster, and then again the same on the other side. 3 to the left, 3 cluster shells, 1, 2, 3, and place your 3rd stitch marker in that shell. And this is your neckline, and we're pretty much virtually going to be working the same stitch. We're just going to change it up ever so slightly to elongate that stitch and build a little from this section, from the 1st stitch marker all the way around past the 2nd and the 3rd. And that will be our neckline, and what this is going to do is build just a little bit more width than the rest of the body of the work, so that when you have, here's how the sides will come down, you'll have the neckline, because it naturally wants to fold back. So I recreated it by building the width just a little bit to give it that extra help, so it will have the body and the drape and the width that it needs to have that ease to go around the curve of your neck. It allows you to have a little bit of a collar. It just comes gently around. If you like the look of a longer neckline, then you can go even one cluster beyond that. If you want your neck, your collar, excuse me, a little bit lower, you can go one shell below that. Make sure you do that on both sides so your work is symmetrical and even. Okay, so go ahead, mark those points. It's much easier when your work is flat to get those stitch markers placed than when you have the side stitched up and it starts taking a whole nother form. Okay, so I will see you on the next segment, and we'll keep rolling from there. So, depending on which you decided is going to be the inside and which is going to be the outside, you have it spread out lengthwise, long length end to end. Then you take that length and from top to bottom, not side to side, you fold it in half. Now we're going, you see the half portion, we're going to make our armholes. So here's where your fold is going to be the top. That's where your shoulder is. And then once we have sewn the sides up a little bit, then you bring this part back up. Your arm goes through here, and this is your top again that goes around your neck. Okay, so if you take this piece, the side, now you can turn it so you can access it a little bit easier. And you want to leave enough for a comfortable arm opening. So what I suggest, and because everyone is shaped so differently, is I take a tape measure and I go around the circumference of my upper arm, the widest part, which is usually the center of your bicep. Okay, so the widest part of your arm, I split that number in half, and then I added an extra inch for ease of movement and to have some room to work back and forth. So from where I put my, get one of your stitch markers, and in one of these loops, wherever you decide that that's comfortable for you, you can use a stitch marker to hold those two together, and then you go ahead and you try it on one side, and you can put a couple more stitch markers because we are going to crochet this together. So to keep it closed, just to give you a good idea of how this is going to fit, you can put one at the end, one in the center. So we're going to close this from the bottom up to the point where you determined that fits you. So you go ahead and you try this on. You're going to put your arm through here. This portion goes around the top of your neck, around your shoulders, and across. You can do both sides if you want to, but one side should give you a pretty good idea. But if you really want more accurate, just go ahead, take your measuring tape, determine your number. Just make sure that they are exactly the same placement on both sides from top to bottom. And I just made sure I stretched my arms out. I stretched them behind me and up and down, and just to make sure that it was comfortable and I had plenty enough room to move around. Okay, so you turn your work. What we're going to do first is stitch together this side seam here, and then we're going to work a little border around the armhole. We're going to do that for each side, and then we'll do the trim around the body of the work. So I want to show you something here very important. When you are joining your side seams, and the one where we had the chain 6 loops, not the side where you have the triple crochets, because that's a straight line and it's very easy to see where you join at the base, at the bottom, the edge of the work, and where those triple crochets wind up, and you join to the base of those. So on the side where it's the chain 6 loop, join into the second chain over from the edge, from your edge, or if you look from where your cluster comes out, it would be the 5th chain up. So because that's a chain 6, there's one that's hidden, so it's easier to count over on this edge. Do that on both sides. You can see we have 1, 2, the second chain over, 1, 2, the second chain over, go through those loops. This is where you need to attach. This is very important because it's going to make all the difference when we do our border around. Like, it's going to give you that center single crochet where it divides, where it alternates. You have a cluster, the chain 5 single crochet, cluster, chain 5 single crochet. So this will give you that separation in the middle, so the stitch count stays even and in keeping with the pattern. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So that's where you will begin your join, right there. Okay, alrighty. So just wanted to make a note of that because I kind of discovered it as I went a little bit ahead and realized, oh, you know, for that number to work out, that's what we need to do. Okay. Away. And after you've chained one, to lock it in, kind of tighten that stitch down a bit and chain 3. The most important thing is to make sure your clusters are lined up so that everything will be as even and lined up as possible. So you can put a little stitch marker in here and there, or pins, or you know, whatever you have that works for you. If that helps keep everything in place. And please take your time with this part. It's just a small amount, so there's no need to really rush through with that, and then you'll be a lot happier with the results. So after you've chained 3, if you just take your hook and lay it down parallel horizontally on top of your stitches, you can see where this next stitch will be, because we want this to be as flat and flush against the work as possible, not so tight or spread out to where it tightens your work and squishes it in. But we don't want the scallops and the big loops visible, because then that will be visible on the outside as well. So this is just to help give you an idea, a little gauge of where your placement is. There, see if that's better. My shoulder out of the way this time, I hope. Okay, so this time we are going to work through the chain stitches instead of around and over, because if you go around and over, then you're going to have a horizontal, your connection, you know, where you make the connection is going to, you're going to see these horizontal lines going all the way up on the outside of your work. So if your 3 stitches takes you, sometimes it's going to take you to this little single crochet, great. Sometimes it's going to take you to the chains. So whatever it works out to, that's where you're going to work your stitches in. The first couple are going to be a little the most trickiest. I lay this across and it's looking to be about here. This is not precise. You just have to find a place where it is going to lay evenly and neatly, and put your hook into both loops, whether it be the chain or the stitch, and then we're just going to slip stitch through and then through the loop on your hook. You can check your work to see how that lays. Looks pretty good. Again, this is all we're going to do. Chain 3. And you see now that I've made that connection, it's already staying, that first connection, it's already staying together a lot easier. Looks like this is a good spot. I will go through both loops and to the other side. Slip stitch through, chain 3, and just repeat this process. And try to go through both loops on each side if possible, because that's going to give you the most secure join. And if you think, okay, well maybe this, if you get one that's a little, your chain that you're creating is a little too loopy, you can just pull that back and take it over one more stitch if you want. We're just joining together to keep it even and neat. But if it's one stitch forward, one stitch back, as long as it's not bunching your work, you'll be just fine. Looks like this one's taking me over to that single crochet on this side. So fortunately we just have a short space to deal with here, which is nice. Make sure as you go it's laying well, and together your clusters are lining up. So chain 3, go over to the next spot, line that up first, make sure you're going through both loops on both sides. If you can fit it in, sometimes you might not be able to catch both. Couple more to go, chain 3. And I stop and I make sure that these clusters are lined up before I go on to my next one. And yes, it would be much easier, it most definitely is, to just go around those chain spaces. It's easier, it's faster, but it doesn't look as nice. So here's what I've done so far. Here's what the join looks like. If you want to just do the light steam blocking, as you do, it's going to just relax these stitches a little bit and can make them more flat, or depending on if you're working with a natural fiber, you don't have to worry about melting issues. You can always take an iron, put it on low, flatten just this part out a little bit, but it doesn't stick up on the inside, and it's not visible, and I can't feel it because I also have the texture of this on the inside too, which is approximately the same height. So if I turn that right side out just to show you what that looks like so far, and then you can decide if this look works for you, or if you prefer, stitching them together. That is up to you. You can see a little bit of the horizontal lines going on, but not overly so, and in my opinion that blends in pretty well. Blends in enough for me. Okay, so I'm going to carry on and go up to the top. Alright, I hope you did all okay with yours. Anytime we can do the less ends to sew in, the better. Don't you agree? So, you have your work wrong side out because we just finished crocheting the seam, and I tried mine on. It lays just fine as far as where the stitch placement is, so I'm going to leave it where it is, even though holding it up it didn't look quite right, but when I tried it on it's fine. So take your skein. You have enough room, hopefully, depending if you're working with a cake or not and how big it is, but hopefully there's enough room if you do, so that way you don't have to cut off your ends, but just pull up enough of a loop so you don't lose that. And if you have to cut it, you have to cut it, but you can take your skein, go through the armhole all the way out the other side, and turn your work now right side out. I'll put your working yarn aside just like you do. I tell you, the day that I can figure this out and keep my shoulder out of the camera, I'll have to throw a party. That's where I connected. I'm going to just move this aside just for a sec, and now I'm going to put it back into where I came up from the other side, the last stitch of my join. I'm just going to have to make a little bit of a jog to get from there over to this first chain space. So I'm going to chain 2 and then go right into the chain space, and do an extended single crochet. And if you don't know how to do one, I'm going to show you right now. It's very easy. You start just like you do a single crochet, but instead of when you yarn over, you go through 2 stitches. You go through the first stitch, then yarn over, and then go through both. Then you chain 1, another extended single crochet, chain 1, and another extended single crochet, slip stitch into the stitch in between each of these chain spaces here, and into the next chain space, extended single crochet, chain 1, extended single crochet, chain 1, extended single crochet, slip stitch, and it's all part of this one stitch here. It kind of looks like a sideways single crochet, if you will. Now this side that I started on is the side with the chain 6. The other side is the triple crochet, and that's going to be a lot easier to work into, and your single crochets that you're slip stitching into are more defined. So again, extended single crochet, chain 1, extended single crochet, chain 1, and one more time, one more extended single crochet, slip stitch into a single crochet. Complete this all the way around, and when you get back to the end, I will show you how we connect to the beginning. And we're back around. Now here's that beginning stitch where it came out of. I'm going to just put the stitch marker back in. I like to leave it in until I'm completely done. And some projects I might sew my ends in as I go along, depending on what it is. But for most of them, I wait until the very end, just in case there's something I want to change, something I need to fix. Okay, so we're simply going to slip stitch, go to the stitch on top of that we just began with down there. We're going to add another row to the sleeve. This is what it will look like, and it does add a nice little extra something decorative around the bottom of the armhole, and this just little bit of weight, but it's still light, not bulky at all. That just really helps it to lay nicely, give good drape and body at the same time. Now we'll carry on and finish the last row in the armhole. I've already slip stitched into the beginning, the slip stitch where we began. Now remember, you have the 2 chain 1 spaces in between that center extended single crochet, and you have the chain 1 before, the chain 1 after. That's what we're going to be working into, and then slip stitching in between into that slip stitch. Alright, so in that first chain 1 space, work 1/2 double crochet. You know your half double, you yarn over, put your hook in the space you're working into, yarn over and pull through, yarn over, and then you pull through all 3 loops. And in that very same chain 1 space, now work a double crochet. I'm just going to work over those ends on the back side. Alright, now chain 1, and we're going to reverse that into the next chain 1 space, all in this section. So now we're going to work a double crochet, and then a half double, all in that same space. Don't chain one, remember. Now go down 2. Remember, here's where we slip stitched into that chain 5 space where we began. So now at the top here, we're going to, into that slip stitch, fit your hook through and do another slip stitch. And then jump right over to that next group of extended single crochets and chain ones. You can see here's the first chain 1. Again, work 1 half double, followed by a double crochet with the chain 1 to separate, and then jump over to that next chain 1 space, and again work a double crochet and 1 half double, and anchor that by slip stitching into and through both loops the slip stitch that we had made in the previous round attaches to the single crochet, which attaches to the chain 1 space. That's more accurately, but hopefully you knew what I meant. All right, and that's what you're going to do all the way around. And then when you get back to the beginning, instead of slip stitching into the top of the slip stitch over 1. And that's going to bring it together and just anchor that down a little bit better. Okay, so go ahead and do another. So jump over the chain 1 space, work 1 triple crochet, a double crochet, chain 1, skip this next extended single, and then into the chain 1 space next to that, work the double crochet and the half double, and slip stitch into the slip stitch, which is just slightly to the right of that single crochet below. Go up from that, and the slip stitch is just slightly to the right of it. So that gives us a nice little valley and peak, ebb and flow, if you know what I mean. And then that slip stitch in between brings it down, so it gives you that nice scallop shape. All right, so go ahead and finish your round, and when you get to the end, I'll show you how we will connect, which is just ever so slightly different than the way that we've been doing it. Okay. All right, so I'm back around, finished my last group of the half double, double, and so forth. So here, instead of fitting it just to the right, put it into that very top. Here's where we slip stitched. There's the original single crochet that connected to the chain 5 loop when we got started in the first round. So go up 2, and you can see the 2 loops of that slip stitch. Just fit it in there and slip stitch. That's it, and that'll give us, again, a nice connection, seamless, and it looks just like all the others. I'll go ahead and cut. Okay. And I yarn over and pull through one time, pull up the loop to just lock that in. Okay, so now we get to move on to the border. Yay! All right, see you there. And we'll put that border, we're going to put it all the way around. It's going to give us a nice neck edge and a pretty front portion, and it'll bring this front in even a little bit more to the center, and it's going to give us a real pretty bottom too. And I will finish up my other side, and then we'll finish up the border together, and then we're done. Yay! See you in a little while.